Welcome to the Regen Brands podcast. This is a place for brands, retailers, investors, and other food system stakeholders to learn about the consumer brands supporting regenerative agriculture and how they're changing the world. This is your host, Kyle, joined by my co-host, AC, who's going to take us into the episode.
On this episode, we have Benina Montes, who is the founder and co-owner of Burroughs Family Farms. Burroughs Family Farms is supporting regenerative agriculture with their regenerative organic farm, producing almonds, olives, and walnuts while raising pastured sheep and poultry. Their brand predominantly sells almond-based products like various nut butters and their new almond concentrate, along with whole snacking almonds offered in various formats and flavors. In this episode, we learn about the Burroughs family's long history in farming and with food brands. Benina details their regenerative journey and how they became the first almond farm in the world to be Regenerative Organic Certified. And we learn about why they launched their own brand and how it has grown over the last few years. Benina and her family are proving firsthand on their more than 1,000 acres that almond farming can be both regenerative and productive, leading to big wins in water infiltration, farm profitability, crop nutrient density, and more. They even host an annual Regenerative Almond Field Day to share their efforts with other farmers, brands, retailers, researchers, and more. We are pumped to have Benina join us, and we hope you enjoy this one as much as we did. Let's go. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Regen Brands podcast. Very excited today to have our friend Benina from Burroughs Family Farms with us. So welcome, Benina.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
We're excited to have you here. We're in kind of a silly mood. We're excited. We haven't had a guest on in quite a while. We already had like 4 opening mishaps. So it's going to be a fun episode. And we get to talk about almonds. So I'm super excited.
Yes.
But Benina, for those who are unfamiliar with the brand, give us a quick lay of the land. What sort of products do you produce and where can people find your products today?
Awesome. Yeah. So we have, you can see behind me on the top shelf, there's a 3-pound just all natural bag, which is on Amazon. We also have creamy and crunchy almond butter, which is available also on Amazon, but more importantly, we're on the West Coast in brick and mortars with Whole Foods and a lot of wonderful independents. And then we came out this year with an almond milk concentrate, which won an XD, and that's on our website and Amazon as well.
Okay, this is a controversial question. Are you creamy or are you crunchy?
You know, they are both wonderful. I do like a little crunch, but it's also kind of like the word almond. You know, here in the Valley, we call them almonds. And people will say, well, how are you supposed to pronounce them? And I always say, I really don't care how you pronounce them as long as you eat them. But the backstory is that they are an almond on the tree, and then they get the L shaped out of them, and then they become an almond.
Love that.
That's like the real term. So we've never actually eaten an almond. We've only eaten an almond.
I mean, like I said, I really don't care how you say it as long as you eat them. But as my brother says, are they nuts or walnuts? And do you say salmon or salmon? I don't know. It's just fun.
Man. I'm both learning and confused, and you know, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
I love it. And Benina, share some of the history, and I think you got 5 generations of family members that have been in farming and involved in this business. So just take us back to kind of how did this thing all get started and that family legacy?
Yeah, so my great-grandfather had a milk delivery business here in California. He ended up starting a dairy so he could like make sure he had his milk supply. And so that dairy was in the East Bay, Knightson, Brentwood area for many, many years. And they had, we still have all the old milk bottles, Burroughs Brothers, Cloverleaf. There were different brands. They even have like the cream top that they could have. And in the 60s, they ended up selling that because, some of the family split apart. My grandparents ended up finding the place that we're currently at in the early 70s. And it wasn't supposed to be the new spot for the dairy, but in 78, they did end up moving the dairy down here. And then in the late 80s, started planting almonds with improvements in irrigation. So we were able to plant that. And
real quick, why did they decide on almonds? Going from dairy to, they could have done who knows what else. Why almonds? Is that just like a good crop for that area?
Yeah, so this is Mediterranean climate. It gets
Right.
cold enough in the winter, so you have chill hours, but then it gets hot enough so that the actual nuts can mature. And I think they were starting to take off. It was more of a diversification tool. We didn't
Mm.
stop dairying at that point. We totally still had the dairy going, but it was just a diversification. We also had a herd of beef cattle and then crops for the dairy as well. So very diversified, which goes into, well, so then my generation
Yeah.
started coming back in. And at that point, my dad and kids were going one direction. My uncle and his kids were kind of going a different direction. So at the end
Mm.
of 2003, the family split up. I mean, the land split up. We were obviously
Hmm.
still a family. And we're still neighbors and we have, good relationship, but our family went down the organic path. And
Mm.
my sister had already had a grass-based seasonal dairy. She had gone to New Zealand to learn about dairying down there, came back,
Mm.
started the dairy, and it was really cool. Cows are coming in and out of the field to milk. We weren't taking food to them. They were literally going in and out. And it was seasonal, like they shut down in mid-November, and then the cows would start calving again in mid-January. And so my brother liked it. He was an animal guy. He trained dogs and horses, and this was an opportunity for him to have a business that would also, generate income, but also kind of fill his love of the land.
Yeah.
And so the ground had never been sprayed. So that was like our first real introduction into organic.
Mm.
And, it's like a little bit scary, but organic was rising. And his wife, Meredith, um, was very good with animals, and the toolbox changed. So it was nerve wracking in the beginning, but they did a really good job of learning different products to use and how to be more proactive instead of reactive. And so with the success that they were having, my sister started transitioning her dairy, took 3 years. And then meanwhile, I'm kind of watching, having come from this diversified background, going,
Hmm.
okay, I'm home from college and now we just have almonds. Like, how
Hmm.
how do I diversify that? And so in 2006 we started. We found somebody that would consult with us that had some more experience than we did, so
Yeah.
we felt comfortable. By then it was a couple years in on the dairy, and once you start down this path, you just start seeing more life. You see the interaction, and again, going from that reactive killing to that proactive, like, habitat
Hmm.
mentality, you just start questioning everything. Why are we doing this the way that we're doing?
Hmm.
And so, I, especially when money is involved, what is your reasoning for telling me that I need this product? Is it to line
Right.
your pocketbook, or is it because it's actually necessary?
Right.
And I kept seeing our trees, they weren't defoliating, meaning the leaves coming off. They were staying greener longer, not as stressed. And so it just made me really question, like, why are you telling me to spray this thing? It's not just going to kill the one bad bug, but it's also going to kill all the beneficials as well. And so
Mm.
that was just always like kind of in my mind, like, why are we doing this? And that was in 2006 that we started. In March, we added it the next block in August of the same year. And then I got married in 2009. We had started adding a couple more fields. And in 2010, I got pregnant. And I was like, I just don't want to have this split operation. Number one, you're having to
Mm.
wash all of the equipment in between
Right.
fields. And
Hmm.
I didn't want to be responsible for having I didn't want to be adding more poison to the world, especially carrying a baby
Yeah.
inside and being around that. And so we looked at the numbers and wanted to make sure that we could survive financially by going down that road. But it looked like we would be good, and we knew we would make more money staying conventional. But by then we had just completely drank the Kool-Aid, although not Kool-Aid because it probably has total food dyes and sugar, and so we were not drinking that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so yeah, by 2015, the whole farm had been certified. I think we were just under 1,000 acres by then. And I thought, this is enough. Like, we're good. We've done it all. We just have to maintain this and keep going. And then my parents started talking about regeneration or regenerative farming. And I was just like, what the hell is this? And this is one more thing. My mom was also trying to get us to do biodynamic, and that was a little too frou-frou for me. So I would, without knowing anything, I was just like, well, because how do you time your harvest to the moon when you have 1,000 acres or whatever?
Right.
I don't know that much about that. I shouldn't really be commenting, but I thought it was going kind of down that, and I was just like, there's no way. And so we got an email from Tommy Fenster. He was at CSU East Bay at the time, and he wanted to do a study comparing regenerative and conventional almonds. So of course I hit forward to my parents and said, if you want to, call him back if you want, I'm good. And then the study came out from Ecdiocese, and it was very powerful for me, having just had SGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, come through, knowing that we were going to have reduced water availability and increased costs because of that water. That's just one part, just the water part, not including all the rest of the continued costs that keep climbing in California. So once that came out, I was just like, give it to me. How do we do this? How do we implement this as fast as possible? And it wasn't like it was like going from, like hardcore conventional and then becoming regenerative. I mean, we were organic already. We had a ton of what I call volunteer vegetation. Instead of calling it weeds. I don't like the negative connotation. And so, we just were very much more intentional in our practices at that point.
Benina, when, my assumption is for most of that or all of that time you just laid out, y'all were just selling into commodity markets or kind of to some sort of processor, not having your own brand. When did your own brand come into the picture?
So, my husband and I got married in 2009, and my sister, he was actually working for my sister at the time. And she had, I think, read a book or had gone to Salatin's farm. And so she wanted to bring in organic pastured chickens and have them work on their dairy. But she had had her fourth kid in 2010. And she was tired of the seasonality of not having enough and the stores being mad at her, or having too much and giving them to food banks. And she was like, I'm done doing these chickens. And my husband likes chickens, and my dad wanted to keep them going. So we were like, all right, well, let's take this on. Let's add this. So that's when Burroughs Family Farms was actually started, was in 2010. And it's a partnership between my husband and I. And
and was it originally to sell the chickens, not the
almonds? It was for eggs.
Okay,
correct.
For the eggs.
Yes. Yeah. Well, going back just a little bit, our company name was called Vista Livestock. And then when my dad and my uncle split, in the coin toss, my dad got to keep the name and the address and the phone number. Oh, sorry, name and address, not phone number. But Vista Livestock, we had no livestock. We only had trees, and it didn't necessarily make sense. So that's when we added Burroughs Family Orchards.
I'm just imagining your husband proposing to you with a ring and an empty egg carton. It's like, I will keep the egg business going, and I'd like to marry you, if that's cool.
that was after we were already married, like a year later.
Okay.
But, yeah, that was For any chicken farmers, if you need an idea later for how to propose, you could try that. So that's how it started, and then we were going to the Bay Area with these eggs. I mean, I literally drove one case with 15 dozen in a Prius to Rainbow Grocery. That was like our first delivery, and I was just like, wow, so excited. Which is nothing. Like, it's 15 dozen, it's like nothing. But I was very excited. Anyway, so we eventually got a refrigerated van, and it was like, why don't we add more to the van since we're already going there? And if people like our eggs, they're probably going to like the rest of our products. So my mom had always given like flavored almonds as a gift during the holidays. So we're like, well, why don't we just bag that and put a label on that and start adding that? And then a friend of ours did almond butter, and it was amazing. I'm like, well, why don't we just try it? Let's see what happens. Yeah. And again, back to that Mediterranean climate. Well, olives are also grow very well in that. So I was like, well, why don't we put olives, so that we have a little diversity, and then we of course started adding that to the mix up too. So that's kind of how it how it started. But I do think it is cool, that the great grandfather had his own branded products
Yeah.
way before we did. So
Yeah.
it's been fun.
Super cool. I appreciate that story a lot. And there's one thing in particular you said that I really, really loved, and it's that organic and regenerative farming is proactive instead of reactive. And I think, the comparisons, I think it's really nice to compare how we treat our soil to how we treat ourselves and our bodies. And it's almost like, the food is medicine, like being proactive with your health instead
Exactly.
of reactive with your health, and putting those poisons in your body instead of, being healthy up front. And it's like, that's how you're treating the land. So I think that's a really nice analog. And I don't think anybody said that before on the podcast. So that was really interesting. Two, you mentioned when that almond study came out that it was super powerful. What did you learn in the almond study, and what were the things, like the takeaways that made you feel like, hey, I want to do this on my farm? What were like those key things for you?
6 times better water penetration coming in, soaking in.
Wow.
Yeah.
So hold on,
And
does that mean you can use 6 times less water for the same result?
I don't know that we can be that extreme yet, but
Okay.
we are like, that's the goal. Like, how do we increase our soil organic matter and the biology? Like, how do we keep pushing this when we're in basically a desert with a great water system,
Yeah.
And there was also way more life with bugs, even rodents, birds. And to me, that's just more appealing. I take it personally now as I'm driving around and I see bare ground, and it makes me hurt now. Just thinking it's just so sterile and gross. And a couple of weeks ago, we actually were giving a tour, and I was shocked because this was like the 3rd day of tours up and down the valley. And they were like, wow, you have so many birds here. We've been on this tour and we haven't seen any. How is that even possible? That it is that just dead, that birds don't even want to be on this other land. Like, it's pretty rough.
It's crazy. I'm reading a book that is not at all related to agriculture in any capacity. But
here comes a Kyle book plug. An episode at least.
I haven't finished it yet, so I don't know if I can recommend it. But it's called Undaunted Courage, and it's the story of Lewis and Clark journeying across the continent of the United States. And I'm not too far into it yet, but they talk about these like legendary, extraordinary geese and duck migrations. Yeah. And I can only imagine the amount of life, to your point, like wildlife that this land supported before we started spraying it with poisons and sterilizing the environment, And then there's the anecdotal studies or qualitative information you get from my truckers. Like, there's just less bugs. Like, we don't have to clean our windshields as much. Like, there's so many weird little things that we hear about how there's the life is leaving the land, which is just super sad.
Well, and it's just an indication. It's a precursor. How do we not connect that when we have endangered species and we have less and less diversity, we're next?
Totally.
Right. I'm so bullish on tree crops in regen because I think those are systems that just farming's never easy, right? So I don't want to make that like my statement here, but I do think those systems are easier to implement the practices as far as what I understand versus like heavily annual systems. Benina's facial expression, I can't tell if she's going to agree or disagree with me. I'm not saying we've seen that level of adoption. I do think kind of annual corn and beans and row crops, we've seen more like regen hype or more whatever. But like you said, Benina, with the bare ground thing, it's like, okay, you have a permanent tree crop that's planted in alleys. You have all this space between them that you can get vegetation. You could integrate livestock if you can figure out how to sell it and what to do with it. These are all things that you've done, that you've proven can be done. I'm sure that was very hard, and you'll inform us about, what order did that go in? How hard was it? Et cetera. But I'm just very bullish on the potential for that because I think it's possible. But maybe I've also been led to think it's easier than it is by seeing the beautiful photos of Burroughs Family Farms with vegetation up to children's heads and, animals walking around between the rows of trees. So I guess super long way of me saying, let's talk about the agronomics a little bit and basically how you've built those systems and really layered these practices in. Because when I look at a picture of what y'all do versus like a conventional almond farm, it's like basically on the right or on the left, it's trees and dirt. And on the right, it's like trees, animals, vegetation, just teeming with life, like you just talked about. So take us through the journey of practice adoption, I guess, is what I was really getting to.
I do want to just give a plug for California because we have so many of the first being certified regenerative, but it is 100% a different context than the Midwest. And I always look at that and I'm like, whoa, I feel like, and I shouldn't say easy because you're right, farming is hard wherever you are. But I feel like we're going up against a very hard industry because everything is kind of based on having this bare ground, um, specifically harvest, because that's how you stay in business is by getting your product out of the field, to processing. And so that has definitely been a struggle. Okay, so
hold on, Benina, before you go from that, explain what that means to people. Like, explain how most people actually get the almonds off the tree and pick them up from the ground, because I think that's important context for people to understand why there is a lot of bare ground.
So almonds, and we also are I don't even think we talked about everything that we're farming, but we're farming almonds, we're farming walnuts, olives, and then we have this flock of sheep, and we also have the pasture chicken. Yeah. So almonds and walnuts are both shaken. There's a machine that comes up, grabs the trunk, and it shakes it. The nuts fall to the ground where they dry 7 to 10 days. Walnuts, you can just go and pick them right up. But the almonds have to dry because there are 3 parts that come off at that time. The first part is a hull on the outside, and that's green all year until it starts maturing, and it will split open, and then it will start drying, and then the shell will be revealed. And then inside the shell is the actual nut or meat, which is the almond nut. So all 3 of those are used. The outside goes primarily for dairy feed. The shell can be used for bedding or landscaping. And then, of course, you have the actual product inside. So once the nuts are on the ground, there's a machine that comes through and sweeps it up. You could kind of envision, I don't know, some kind of Roomba system, but it's blowing the nuts under the tree to the other side to get it out from underneath the tree. And then it's sweeping and putting the nuts into a row. So you drive down the row, come back, and then you go up and back a few times. And so if there's a bunch of unevenness, if there's a bunch of grass or even rocks, like all of that just gives you a little bit more of a hassle. So once you get it into that windrow, like for us historically, we would put it in, then there'd be all this grass. So then you'd have to pick it up, blow all the grass out, lay it back down, and then pick it back up. And so the whole industry is set up that way. Like that's how it's done. So how do you keep the soil covered? How do you integrate livestock? How do you leave a living root if the industry is set up for total bareness? Like it's a total uphill battle. But pistachios, prunes, those are in a cap strain type system. So, you're hooking up to the tree but there's a receiver so that it doesn't hit the ground. Right. And so we were able to find a harvester that we could use that would allow us to get enough acreage covered so that we could actually do it. It's not perfect, but it's allowing us to totally follow the principles. And we're pushing it to the extreme side. I heard other farmers on different podcasts talk about not adopting regenerative until there was no risk financially, so that they didn't have to carry all that. And I was just thinking, how can they think that way? Because we're never going to get any traction if that is everybody's attitude. And now, years into this, I'm like, it would be nice to have a little less risk and somebody to help us, kind of come through this. So maybe I should have listened a little bit more. But I still, for our family, we are just total believers that we can't keep waiting, that we have to move forward with this regenerative. And I mean, not everybody's watched Kiss the Ground or Common Ground, which are very powerful movies. To visually show, what is going on. But like we just talked about, I mean, I don't think endangered species is a foreign concept to anybody. I mean, I think they teach that in elementary school. So I don't understand why people can't connect the dots. But what was your actual question about the?
The yeah, I want to clarify one thing that you said, just so it really goes home for people that maybe don't have as much knowledge as the three of us. It's like you had to go buy, or at least you can educate us on a very big, probably very expensive piece of equipment that shakes the tree, catches the almonds before they hit the ground, versus the industry standard of shaking the tree, letting everything hit the ground, and doing that collection
Correct.
process.
Yeah.
Like most conventional producers, which that's a good illustration of that risk comment that you made, right? That's a total like change that probably has cascading effects into 20 other things that y'all have implemented, like the vegetation and the livestock. The original question was just, can you remember the chronological order of practice adoption? Like, did you first kind of start letting the vegetation grow, and then you mowed it, and then you figured out, oh, we could put livestock on it, and then you bought the equipment to do the tree shaking? Like, what
Yes.
has that process been like?
Well, so having the two siblings with the grass-based dairy and then seeing the immense biomass that can grow under the almonds, it was always like, how do we use this? We are spending so much time and energy to mow. Like, how can we do this? So there were different times that we tried to put cows in and figured, okay, they're way too big. How about if we try some yearling heifers? Can we try that? And it's not, we're doing this at scale. This isn't like a 40 or 60 acre block that is, everything is very close.
I just gotta say, I'm just imagining cows trying to walk in like with the corners, like everything's too small, and they're like these giants like running into stuff, like literally like a bull in a china shop, and it's like cows in an almond field.
Well, so you can see, I don't know if you can see in the background, the sheep are in the middle. So there is plenty of space for them to walk down the rows. But when we started the transition from conventional to organic, because we were doing so much mowing, we ended up putting all of our irrigation in the tree. And so it's probably anywhere from like 4 to 6 feet off of the ground. And so, trying to cross the tree row, that's where you can get hung up, so they would like break things or whatever. So, so the transition was, I don't know. I feel like it was gradual. I don't feel like it was like a huge thing for us to be full on regenerative, but we already had a lot of ground cover. But for harvest specifically, and the more that we kept learning, about the living root and keeping it covered and soil temperatures, like I was like, okay, well, we got to really push this. And if we're going full bare ground during harvest and then having to restart every year, like it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
Then if you go deeper into that, well, how many passes in the orchard are we actually making? And we're doing.
And when you say passes, that's how many times do the sheep actually go through the specific section, or
no? This is not even with sheep yet. This is just with tractors. So historically, on the organic side, we couldn't use an herbicide, which would kill the vegetation under the trees, right? So we had to do that in a different way. So we were going down with side mowers to mow under the tree. And it's on a tractor, and there's like a round head, and it will go, and then when it hits the tree, it kind of kicks back and comes around it. So we were doing that with mowers behind it, going up and back, many passes through the year. Then we're on double drip, which means that the whole ground is not irrigated. So the middles will be kind of drier, which, The
middles between the rows of trees.
Correct. Yeah. The middle will dry out. So, so after we did the mowing, then we would use those sweepers for harvest and bring all that dried biomass to the middle. Then we would use flamers to basically singe the top of the grass under the trees so that it would be relatively bare. And then we would just mow in the middle. But I mean, it was not the safest thing. And I'm so glad that we're done with that. So that's just to prep for harvest. Then the nuts are on the ground. We're sweeping them. It's slower. It takes more time. Then we are having to pick up the almonds, get rid of all the trash, lay it back down, then pick it up. And then because we've swept everything into a row, it can create kind of like a crown. So then after harvest, you have to go back through and float it out and make it like smooth back out.
Yikes.
So the last 2 years, all we've done is just mow one time right down the middle. It's called an auger mower or a mow and blow. And so it just mows 10 feet wide and moves all the dry material to the sides. and that's where we lay the almonds. But this next year, actually, we're not even going to do that. We're literally just going to catch it and we're going to dry it outside of the field. That way we don't have to spend, again, all that energy doing that. And I'm just, what does that mean? It means that we can keep building soil organic matter and keep building habitat and have more life for the microbes and, just keep that system going. Talked about temperature a little bit. So as you start learning more, it gets really exciting to see, okay, this is what my practices are doing. And like in our walnuts, we grazed them and then the sheep came out and we didn't really do anything. And the sheep don't necessarily have to eat everything, but even just having them trample the biomass down is good. So we have, a pretty thick mat. And, this summer I think it was probably in the 90s maybe, but with the temperature gun, you're easily over 130, if not hotter, depending on where you're at in the valley. And you dig down underneath, and then you're low 90s or even high 80s. That's, 30, 40, 50 degree difference. And we wonder why things are hotter, like,
Hold on, I just want to make sure that because to me that is super, super important. You're saying that on a 90-ish degree day, air temperature, some farm soil will be 130 degrees because it's bare, it's not protected. But on your farm,
hotter.
where the sheep are, or hotter, where the sheep have, kind of roller crimped, some level of protection over the soil, you can dig through that and get a temp on your surface soil temperature, and it's high 80s, low 90s, like very, very tolerable, not killing the life in the soil.
Right. Yeah. Amazing.
Incredible.
But I don't know that everybody knows this. I don't feel like farmers are like, oh, we're just like trying to be so like destroying life. If we look back, where's the information coming from? I mean, who's funding universities? Who's teaching the classes that you have to get your spray permits? Who's doing all of that, and so again, you're in an industry where this is how it's done and it's freaking risky. I mean, on a daily basis, we're all in Vegas, like literally betting the ranch on a deal. And so it's scary to think, what if I don't spray? Like, what's going to happen? Will I have a crop? How much production will I go down? So I don't want like conventional farmers to be painted as like these evil people that are just like trying to kill the world, because everybody that's farming is literally like pouring their heart and soul into feeding the people. We just need to work on education and sharing successful stories about why things are the way they are. And I mean, Rick Clark's a great example of really pushing it also. But part of that was a health issue, with him and his wife. And so that's what I don't understand is why do we have to get to that diagnosis or get to that point before we make a change? So it's just, again, connecting all those dots. Quick, brief pause. I'm going to go back to your thing because I still haven't actually answered your question. So,
good. Benina, I'm learning a ton myself.
Yeah,
I'm very much enjoying, this is such great learnings for me.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, I really want to encourage you guys to come here and literally check it out.
We will.
We start lambing next week, and then we're going to have another lambing session in January, which are great times to get your
lamb session, not to be confused with a jam session.
Correct.
Just want to point that
you
out.
could combine the two, though. I think that's what we need to do. I think we need to have a lamb jam session.
Yeah,
just a lamb jam. I like it.
I mean, my 10-year-old, well, she's almost 10, but we moved the sheep down so we can watch them because they're going to start. And like every night after school, she's like, okay, we got to go check the sheep. We got to go listen. Sorry, they're out the window. So I'm like looking at them as a reference. But, so we started learning about, the 5 principles. And, I mean, we had the living roots already because we weren't spraying anything, killing it. We did not have intentional grazing plan of integrating livestock. We had tried some heifers. We had tried, especially in the young trees, we could bring the chickens in because there's enough room in the young trees, but in a mature orchard, there's not room for the coop to come down. So we had to bring in that. my mom had already started planting hedgerows, and we had a few, we within an orchard, there's different varieties of almonds, but they're still almonds. But we ended up adding walnuts and yeah, trying to think of what else. Almonds naturally are kind of a no-till system on an annual
Yeah.
basis. There is
Yeah.
major tillage in between orchard plantings, but so it wasn't that big of a difference.
Hmm.
But the animal integration was a big one.
Hmm.
So I talked about how wonderful these dairies were. Well, the original one that is our major legacy closed last December. My sisters closed last year in the fall, and then my brothers closed December 31st, 2020.
Wow.
And so he has a ranch in Oregon and would go back and forth. For many years, he went back and forth. Now they're permanent up there. But he came down and was, I don't know, maybe it was Thanksgiving, but he was telling us about a flock of sheep that was going to be available and how he was going to go talk to one of our friends down here because he had sheep. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, don't go talk to that guy. We should get these sheep. We should have them in here. The dairy's closing, so this will give Dad something to do, and this will give something for the two guys that are working on the dairy. This will be great. They
Yeah.
can be in the pivots where the dairy was when we're not in the orchards. We should do this. And so we got 750 bred ewes. They came
Wow.
February 5th. One lambed actually on the truck, and we get everything unloaded. And meanwhile, I grew up on this diversified ranch, and we had beef cattle, we rode horses, we helped with all that, we worked on the dairy, definitely was involved in animals, but for almost 20 years of my adult life, no animals. Free weekends for the most part, like not having to be tied all the time.
Yeah.
And so the next day, of having the sheep here, my dad was like, yeah, I'm not gonna be managing this. Like, you're gonna need to take this on. And I was like,
Cool.
whoa, this is okay. All right, well, we're gonna roll with this. So anyway, it's been definitely crazy, and people frequently tell me, like, you should not keep the sheep. Don't keep the sheep. Like, just make your life simple. But like, they're so cool and it's fun. And I like having, my kids grow up with this. And I mean, talk about building character on a Sunday afternoon. Hey, the sheep are out. I think it's good character building for my kids. And it is what they're doing is really awesome for the land. And so, this is our 4th year. And so, in 10 years, who knows what it's going to be like. I'm excited for that. So
I'm really curious.
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
No, I was just going to say all that to say it wasn't such a huge difference, but the intentionality over the last 4 or 5 years has really, our soil organic matter has more than doubled. Like, we're definitely reducing our water inputs. I mean, I don't want to throw out crazy numbers, but like this year, compared to our neighbors, we spent half of the water in our area.
Wow.
We're probably at least 40% lower, and we're not getting the production that they do. But if we can lower our costs and still have production, I'd rather have a better ROI and more nutrient density than like say, oh, we got, X number of pounds. Like, how much did it cost you though?
Right. You're focusing on net revenue instead of gross. And
Yeah,
if you can have a more profitable system, awesome. You also started to answer the question I was going to ask you. You implemented these new systems. You've been regenerative for a handful of years now. It sounds like you're saving on water, about 40%. I'm assuming also, less fuel, less machinery with less mowing. Soil organic matter, you said you doubled. Can you share ballpark, like from what to what?
The last time I looked on one field, I think we were like high ones, mid to high ones. And like now we're, in the threes, 3.5. I mean, it varies by block, but yeah, we're definitely going up. I mean, it's incredible to hear, Gabe talk about 8s, 9s, 10% soil organic matter, and there's one guy I know, I think he's got like 5%. But for those that don't know, for every 1% increase, the soil as a sponge can hold 20 to 25,000
Yeah.
gallons more of water. So that's why it's incredibly important that if we get a rain event, we don't want to just say that it rained half an inch. We want to say that our soil soaked up half an
Mhm.
inch.
Benina, I was about to share that stat. We are on the same wavelength right
Sorry.
now.
Kyle
And to
loves
me,
that
it's
stat.
it's my favorite stat. And I think that the regenerative movement as a whole does not talk about it enough, in terms of how it helps to literally cool the area nearby, create drought-resistant soils, can prevent wildfire. Like there are so many cascading benefits to retaining more
Hmm.
water on land. Also, it reduces carbon dead zones in the ocean. Like there's just so many benefits.
Right.
So I'm stoked that you're sharing that stat as well. The other question I had was, now that you've been doing this for a few years, you mentioned your neighbors aren't necessarily all there yet. Are you starting to get some neighbors peeking over the tent and like, hey, what are you doing over here? Is it working? What's the reception been like with your farming peers in the area?
So when Ecdysis came to do the study, they were sharing the results, and that's why we had the first field day in 2022 was to start sharing that information. And so there's one guy that has totally jumped in. He converted one orchard to organic. He's going regen now with it. But it's very hard to stay committed when there's not enough machinery to do the capturing style, and it just can create some struggles. In the last few years, the almond industry has not been financially very well, right? So people are trying to cut costs. So
Yeah,
I haven't
prices are
seen
down.
more cover than I have in the last couple of years than I have in like 20 years, And I think it's just a reflection of people trying to cut costs. But it's been pretty cool to see so much more just volunteer vegetation out there, which is going to be great for the water cycle, because when it rains, there's those raindrops are actually going to have a place to go versus just the bare soil. I mean, we've seen a ton of topsoil runoff, especially after a new development where they're trying to keep everything super clean. You just have these sticks coming out of the ground, and then it rains, and you're just washing a ton of dirt away. But there are people watching. I don't know if they think we're totally crazy, or not, or if they're like, what are they doing with this? But this January will be our 4th year, and we're actually changing the name of our field day from the Regenerative Almond Field Day to the Regenerative Tree Nut Field Day, because we're also growing walnuts, and there's people that are trying to move in this direction, and so I'm trying to the personalities that fit well. Like I'm trying to get us together so we can move the industry forward faster. I mean, we're only harvesting once a year, so it's like, did we have enough bees? Did you have enough chill hours? How much did you prune? Like all of these things play into the role, and so if we can all be working together to figure out what strategies work for regenerative, then we can advance it that much faster. But our, the field days keeps growing, and we're definitely getting other people on board to come. It is hard though, because this term regenerative is becoming popular, even though people may not necessarily be as intentional about the principles as we are.
Totally. I mean, you got a couple city boys here having a podcast where we talk about regenerative. I've not spent many working days on a farm. So it is becoming popular, which is both a great thing and potentially a scary thing, right?
Yeah.
I have a random almond question for you, and then I want to pivot and start talking about the brand. Oftentimes I've driven through some areas of Northern California, and I think what I'm looking at are almond trees, and they have a like black rim around the bottom, like the base of the tree, right above the soil. Are those almond trees, number one? And if so, what is that, and why is it there?
I don't know.
Okay, maybe it's pistachio, maybe it's something else, but I've seen it numerous times on some sort of, I don't know, some sort of tree fruit, nut, something. I don't know. Again, not a farmer, clearly.
It's going to be in one of the books you read soon.
Yeah.
The answer.
Probably.
Almonds are like probably darker. Like walnuts can be painted white sometimes for sunburn. I think the pistachio trees are like not as dark either. But I don't know if it's a function of something that they're spreading at the time that you happen to be driving by, or if it's like natural thing, or is it like something that's attached? I'm
It
not sure.
looks to me like it's a human implemented system to protect something on the base of the tree, but again, I don't know that to be true. And yeah, maybe
Is
it's
it
just
just
weird
the
timing.
color of the tree, or does it look like something's like wrapped around it, like an
It
additional
doesn't look like it's wrapped. It's not
material?
a material. It looks like a spray and or almost like a paint.
Hmm.
Like very like quite thick.
I know on almonds, like we'll paint the end row, like the end tree to designate the
Hmm.
different varieties. Like
Ah,
pink for us,
Ah,
pink is nonpareil, purple is Padre, like this bluish green is Butte. Like
okay.
there's paint on the ends that reflects a variety sometimes.
hmm.
But yeah, sorry, I don't have an answer to that. But later
That
It's
that could
sometime.
be
okay.
the answer.
It continues to be a mystery. Maybe one day we'll solve it. If not, it's okay to have mystery in the
Well,
world.
tell me what town it is later, and then we can investigate.
Okay, I'll keep you posted. I probably won't even remember, but I'll try to look it up on a map.
Okay.
But yeah, let's pivot to the launch of the brand. So I know it started with the eggs.
Mhm.
Then it was I think the flavored or seasoned almonds.
Hmm.
Um, what was it like starting a brand and starting to sell into places like Rainbow Grocery and then having conversations with some of the larger markets in the area?
Um, it was awesome working with the independents that can pivot and change like just so easily
Yeah.
from week to week. On the
Mhm.
eggs, most eggs sold in a grocery store are a large size. Most recipes are for a large, but the chickens don't always lay a large. Sometimes they lay a jumbo or a medium or a small. And so it's been very awesome to be able to work with these independents that can just pivot with week to week, or if you need to run a special. And so that was my retail experience, was literally like a phone call or a text message like, "Hey, Kelly, you good
Yeah.
taking mediums this week instead? Or how about if I throw a discount? How many more cases can you take?" And so like the 2 month lead time to plan out promos,
Yeah.
or, all of that stuff was like, what are you talking about? Like that is so
Mhm.
crazy to me that it's just so obviously corporate. And how do you work
Mhm.
in a food system that is set up for this? Um, it's been definitely a learning curve for sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, farming is hard enough as it is. And again, this is just based on what you've shared, not my personal experience, but trying to then navigate retail sales, I can't even imagine like trying to do both of those at the same time. You mentioned planning promos 2 months out, sometimes 6 months out or more,
Oh yeah.
and to your
Yeah.
point, if you're just dealing with,
Yeah.
you don't know what the chicken's going to lay 6 months out, how could you ever understand that? Right. So yeah, it's gotta be tough.
Yeah, but almonds are awesome because they have a long shelf life. So going away from the perishability of the eggs into like, this shelf stable product is definitely a lot easier. It's definitely not milk or eggs, so that's really good. Yeah, I'm glad that we're establishing a good team that is navigating this. We're thankful for, which is crazy to say in the world, but like thankful to our brokers that are helping us. And the more and more connections that we can make with the
Mhm.
retailers, the better it is. And Whole Foods was able to come out this year and like actually see what we're doing and see,
Yeah.
taste, feel everything that we're putting into this, the passion, the love of the land, and
Mhm.
really diving into that and making that connection. In fact, CEO Jason was able to come with his team, and
Nice.
they actually installed like this labyrinth on this really cool area of the farm, and it was a really special time.
Hell yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I want to bifurcate the conversation and do maybe one thing really quick and then spend more time on the latter. So the
Mhm.
one thing really quick that I would just love for you to speak to, Benina, is just you've had to find a market for some of these livestock products that aren't necessarily the
Mm.
same as a almond or almond butter based brand with national aspirations. Like this is more of a local regional thing. So I just quickly want you to speak to the context of, as a farmer, that's a whole different kind of business that you had to create. And I want to come back over here to the to the more almond based products that have a different kind of scope as a brand, and talk about that. But first, could you just speak to kind of some of the challenges and complexities of building the markets for these additional products from the regenerative practice adoption?
Yeah, so the main thing that we brought in were the sheep, and we were coming into this like during COVID and then post COVID, which
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the specialty or higher end markets where lamb was going were kind of
Mhm.
depressed during that time. So I
Yeah.
feel like we have not like landed on the perfect outlet for our delicious grass-fed regenerative lamb.
Mhm.
Um, and it's, it's a challenge because if I want to sell direct, I have to find a USDA facility. I have to have, freezer cold storage for it, and then
Yeah.
figure out how to ship it in a way that will get to the customer. So we have just been dabbling on that side. We've been more in the mentality of, well, when we first started, to be honest, I was like, oh, they're just taking the place of a mower. So even if I'm not making money on the
Mm.
actual sheep, I'm not
Right.
spending as much on mowing or fuel or whatever. And so
Mhm.
now, as we keep evolving, it's like, all right, everything needs to carry its weight, and we need to dial this in better for sure. So
Mhm.
I don't have a good answer. They've just kind of been going into the market, and somebody's been very special not knowing what they're actually getting.
Mhm. Yeah. Makes sense. I love how it still has that cost reduction benefit, even if you haven't found the perfect, repeatable kind of sales channel for it yet. Um, on the branded side, one thing I'm curious about is like, where do you see almond-based products, right? Like we know that the nut butter category is not growing as fast as it once was. You obviously have the whole kind of almonds that are snackable, but I think, it's like that's not a super innovative product. It's a whole ingredient. So the ceiling for the growth of that somewhat limited. You guys have the concentrate now. Like where do y'all see the future of almond-based products and potential new product innovation type opportunities?
Number one, I think almonds are amazing because they
Yeah.
are so versatile. And I mean, just with a handful of almonds, like if you couldn't eat anything else and you could only eat like a handful of almonds, like it would keep you going for a really long time.
Yeah.
So I am very proud of just the nutrient density that these almonds have. And I know they get a lot of bad raps for water usage, but um, it's also a plant. They're a good thing to have. We just need to figure out how to do it with less inputs.
Yeah.
Um, but they work for gluten free. They work for keto. They work for like so many different styles
Very
of
versatile.
eating.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, we're trying to innovate and come up with some new stuff. I mean, the idea on the almond milk concentrate is, why add that other step of adding water when you think about all of the products that are shipped across the nation? We're shipping so much water, which is also heavy. So
Hmm.
with that, I mean, it's shelf stable. It makes 7 quarts, but Americans are lazy. They don't want to like put one scoop and mix it with some water and, add it to their thing. But like for smoothies, it's great. You don't have
Yeah.
to have, you
Hmm.
go to Costco and your shelf is now filled up with a bunch of space. And so that's why this thing to us does make a lot of sense,
Hmm.
because of that, and easily customizable, great to add to smoothies. Um,
Tastes great. I've had it.
Yeah, like I use it to make granola. You can use it for any of like the Asian like peanut sauce deals. But we're still working on it. I mean, somebody mentioned, like you come up with an almond chip or,
Mm.
Hmm.
something else that way, maybe sauces. Um,
Hmm.
but it is, I mean, what's crazy to me is like the top two shelves, like those products literally only have one ingredient in them, you
Oh,
know?
wow. Yeah.
And so I think we were talking about connecting all the dots, and why how do we get people to connect more of that? And there's no food coloring added in there. There's not added sugars. That's what our family is trying to do, is to produce really good high quality
Mm.
products that are good not only for the planet but also for the person.
Hmm.
And so that takes education,
Hmm.
and but also like I don't want our products to only be like this elitist thing that are just only for a select few.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so we've been in glass for a long time, and there are a lot of purists that want that, and I want to be able to provide that.
Hmm.
But again, it's heavy, and we've had some supply chain issues trying to find the right jars. So we're actually switching to an RPET, which will lower the
Mm.
cost on the shelf, by a lot and make it much more approachable so that it is more accessible to just a normal person that wants to try it, but also should help us get that much more velocity also.
Hmm.
Out of curiosity, what's the percentage difference switching from glass to plastic? Is there going to be like a 20% reflection on shelf, 10%?
I think that we were like normally like $21.99. I think we're trying to be in the $14-15.99 range now.
Oh, wow. That is significant.
Yeah.
Big difference.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
a 25% reduction. Yeah, that's massive.
hmm
Is there a specific way that I can't see that well the
Oh.
shelf, but I'm assuming the almond butters is one of the things you're talking about that has only one ingredient, or no?
Yeah, so the creamy is literally just roasted almonds that are ground up. The crunchy is again roasted almonds ground up with some like chunks left in it. And the almond milk concentrate is just almonds that have had the skin taken off and then run through the same grinder.
Is there some proprietary manufacturing process that lets you do that? Because like all these other nut butters I see on the shelf have like 17 additives and gums and all this other bullshit. Like, is there something proprietary about that, or how is that even possible? And why does everyone else have all this junk in theirs?
Well, we want ours to like taste good naturally on its own. So we pick a certain variety that has a higher oil content that just really shines through. And a lot of nut butters, especially from back in the day, wanted to buy like the cheapest, junkiest, like chipped, broken, tiny pieces that they could, it's just going to get ground up. So what does it matter?
Stepchild nuts.
As soon as the nut is like broken or manipulated, it starts breaking down because the skin on it is altered. So that's one of the reasons I think why our stuff tastes so good is because we're using quality ingredients that that haven't started breaking down. And I think that shines through really nicely in the flavor of our almonds.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious from a retail roadmap perspective. It sounds like you've got pretty decent distribution as it stands. Are you hoping to continue to scale the brand and go for like national distribution? Like, what are the goals for the brand long term?
Yeah, so going back again to California, it's hard to be a business here, and I think not just in farming, but in all businesses, we have seen a big exodus into other states or other countries. And so being vertically integrated and being able to help with your future path is going to be very important, I think, to stay viable, to stay here in California. And I don't know if you guys know this, but 80% of the world's almonds are grown in California. They're not, you may be able to grow a tree in another state, but not necessarily get the production. And I know that people are trying, and climate change may totally make it possible for Idaho or Oregon to be able to grow these now at scale. But all that to say, yes, we want to keep growing and get our products out there. And I mean, this is a dream, but like, how cool would it be to actually have partner farmers, because there's more and more demand for this. There's a handful of brands out there that are truly buying regenerative almonds, but there's a lot that aren't. And that's been very hard for me to watch these brands that say that they're so committed to regenerative, and yet they're still buying conventional almonds, which goes into like, the whole broken food system that we have. And so, it's definitely a struggle, but I think if we can just keep having quality and goodness, that hopefully we can continue to grow and do that. And I mean, again, those are just two products, but I'm kind of excited about, maybe some functional nut butters. I don't know. I don't know that mainstream is like up for all these things, but if we can get back to that food as medicine, do you guys take selenium as a supplement?
I eat Brazil nuts, which are high in selenium.
Yeah. So I as we look at food as medicine, like that's something that is really interesting to me. Because what if you could just take one bite of almond butter and with Brazil nuts and get your selenium. Most soil is deficient in selenium, so we all should be actually taking that.
Have y'all done any nutrient density testing and comparisons there, Benina? Like to have that raw data yet or no?
We sent some in this year, but we haven't gotten the full results back yet. I'm
Mhm.
interested in seeing that. And, I mean, it's a slow process. We're not using a bunch of biostimulants at this point.
Yeah.
But, that's the goal, is to see what can we do as we keep pushing this forward.
The data provider and the scientific team behind those results also has to go build the baseline of all the almond crop.
Right.
So part of it is like you can submit all the individual test samples you want from your farm, but unless they have a robust, sample size of everything else, you can't comp anything anyway. So that's part of it too that I think people don't always realize.
Mm.
So, Benina, I see on the shelf behind you, there's a big N with a, I don't know, blue sun around it. This is my terrible way of describing an XD award. But tell us about that award, what that means to you. And then, what else are you hoping to get out of like retail? I mean, does that award help with retail? Who are your best retail partners today? What do you want to see out of retail?
Yeah, so this was from the 2024 Expo West food show. And so we got the Nexty
Mhm.
Award for Planet Forward product for
Oh
our
yeah.
almond milk concentrate, which
Mm.
is super awesome because we're not shipping, water all over the place. It's shelf stable, takes up less space, super customizable. So we're really excited about that. And again, it only has one ingredient in there. So
Yeah.
we're really proud of it. And hope to see it, expand and go outside of just Amazon or our website.
Mhm.
Um, I think you asked about retail, and so we've really enjoyed who we've been working with so far, which in California has been a lot of independents, but super thankful to Whole Foods for getting us going on the West Coast. I mean, it's really awesome to see your product on a shelf of just a
Yeah.
mainstream store. And it's
Yeah.
even more special to be there with your dad with this big cowboy hat and this big old
Yeah.
beard, like grabbing, his name
Oh
on a
yeah.
jar bottle, like, is really, really fun.
That's amazing.
Um, but how do we keep moving this forward and
Yeah.
make sure that the products that are on shelf aren't greenwashed, that are really actually taking care of the planet? And I think that that's going to have to be a big coalition. It's going to have to be a lot of teamwork. It takes a village. So we're going to
Mhm.
need retail partners, we're going to need distribution partners, and production, and then the farmer. We got to get everybody on the same page, rowing the boat the same direction. And so, the more that retailers can get out and see what's happening at the farm level, and
Mhm.
help just with that whole supply chain, um, and getting that going, is going to be very important. And it's not something that we can just keep waiting on, that, well, the review for the category is not happening till this place, because it literally is going to take such a huge effort to get more and more acreage changed and move this faster. We need everybody on board, and we need everybody on board now. So
Mhm.
my encouragement is just to have more connection and just get more and more SKUs going. And it's going to take time, and it can't all just be an elitist product. So how do we incorporate certain products? I've been disappointed to see that the regenerative almond slash even just trees hasn't grown faster, but we
Mhm.
need it to. Coming
Mhm.
from the Central Valley, where experts repeatedly say that this is the most degraded soil on the planet, is
Wow.
heartbreaking. Okay,
Yeah.
and I live here. Um, so how do we encourage people to do this? Well, it's literally going to take everybody to get going on that. So I think I've said that multiple times over and over. So just, I don't know. We just need more people to have the buy-in.
I totally agree, and I appreciate every point you just said. And I think that there are a number of retailers who are doing great things to support regen, and I think that they can still be doing more at the same time.
Yeah,
In
Mhm.
particular,
me
a
too.
lot of retailers have like a good, better, best pricing system, and regenerative products by default fall into that best category. So they tend to take a higher margin on regenerative products that already have a high premium, right?
Mhm.
So in my mind, I would love to see retailers commit to regeneration by taking a lower margin to make it
Hmm.
more price competitive, to increase velocities, to increase demand, which could then
Mhm.
transition more acreage faster, to save the
Hmm.
soil you're talking about in the Central Valley. And those are the cascading effects we can have with true partnership. So
Yep.
Mhm.
I don't know how that actually happens. It's really hard to tell a retailer, hey, make less money on this product,
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like we're literally trying to save the planet, not to sound too grandiose, but
but
that's the
but
work we're doing.
that's the reality of what we really are trying to do. And I mean, that's definitely, those are definitely really good points, but it's even just saying yes.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
say yes to these products and get them out there so that they're in front of more and more people. And don't put them on the bottom and don't put them at the very top.
Yeah.
In a saturated place, like give them a good spot. And there are definitely, like you said, there are definitely retailers that are doing that. But how do we share more and more with them? And it's just making those connections and having those relationships, I think, to make that work more and more.
Yeah, and shameless plug for the State of Regenerative CPG report we just put out, but we talked about this. We talked about a challenge being the fact that regenerative brands are building these supply chains without the proper rewards or incentives. And so Kyle's idea of kind of pricing architecture changes, but also we put in there, can we eliminate or reduce slotting fees? Can we eliminate or
Yes,
reduce
please.
free fills? There's all these things, and the grand takeaway is we have to create some sort of economic incentive beyond just it helping you get on shelf, because ultimately that's only half the battle, right? And so appreciate everything that everyone's done there. Please keep doing that, retailers. And we have to create some economic incentive for this, because we are all saying verbally that these systems have value, but the brands are actually not really allowed to capture much of that value economically right now. And we just have to find a bridge to that. So we're looking forward to continuing to brainstorm with the coalition membership and also produce content and research with the Institute that could illuminate some potential pathways to try there. But it all comes down to, once again, how do we create some sort of better economic incentive or reward for the enterprises doing the work?
Amen.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Benina, I just want to thank you and kind of commend the work that you're doing in the space. And every time I see you talk or get interviewed or talk at a trade show, you're talking about, hey, like, here's our story. Here's honestly how it's been. You can do it. We're doing it on 1,000 acres. Like, we're doing it at scale. Like, it is possible. And so you've been a very empathetic and realistic voice, I think, in supporting like other farmers in the transition of that. But also on the CPG side, you are certified by both ROC and Regenified. And I think that's a very cool and kind of unifying move by you. So one, I just want to thank you for all that you're doing there, participating in the research studies, the field days. Like, I think it's a huge part of it. And I think we all know, like, you're not making money from any of that. If anything, you're probably paying money to do all of that. But can you just talk to us about, like, why is that advocacy so important, and why did you choose, like, on the branded side to support multiple certifications in a space where we feel like it's gotten rather divisive at this point?
Great question. Um, so I mean, you heard the story about why we're committed to organic, and it's even more and more relevant as my mom and dad have both had cancer. I mean, it's
Wow.
hard, and it's like
Wow.
we're more and more committed, like basically every day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it made sense for us to go rock, Regenerative Organic Alliance, get that certification because we already were organic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it is very contentious, and you have diehard organic people that
Yeah.
are, so passionate about organic, and I love the passion from everybody, but there are just so many acres that need to be touched. And
Mm-hmm.
we had the opportunity to also get Regenified certified. And so we thought, well, why don't we lead by example? And so we have both certifications.
Mm-hmm.
Regenified isn't perfect. There isn't any certifier, I don't think, right now that is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But if we can get more and more acreage to start being covered, to have a cover crop, to have living roots,
Mm-hmm.
we just have to start. And I feel like Regenified has a way to get somebody started. They'll take you where you're at, and every 3 years you have to show reductions. Yes, there are products that they're using that I don't want to use. I don't want to consume them. I don't want to use them on my farm.
Mm-hmm.
But for the greater goodness of the planet, I think that we need to be able to take Farmer Joe where he's at, or Farmer
Mm-hmm.
Jane, and
Yeah.
get them started. And really, I don't. for me personally, like I don't know that you even need to say regenerative or,
Mm.
say you have to be doing all these products, but literally how do we get chemical reduction and how do we get the soil covered more for
Yes.
temperature, for water infiltration? Like, again, I don't care how you say it, just freaking do the principles. We need
Yeah.
it for the planet.
Hmm.
And I mean, we're organic certified, we're regenerative organic certified, now we're regenified, we're even real organic project certified, and
Mm.
now we're Natureland certified for some
I don't
products
even
to
know
go
that one. So,
into Europe. Yeah, it's overwhelming. It's a lot of
yeah.
paperwork. Like it's
Hmm.
beyond. But what we're doing is different. It is unique, and we want to be able to tell our story, and the certifications help do that. Part of
Hmm.
the reason also was because the CDFA, the California Department of Food and Ag, was going to be coming out or is coming out with their definition for regenerative. And 40 years ago, that's what they did for organic. And then that had a um, lasting impression because the USDA picked it up. And then after all that
Hmm.
happened, that went with the planet. So we see that that's going to be happening with regenerative. And again, we are choosing to farm regenerative and organic. That's what we want to do. We do think that that's like the best way that we can go
Hmm.
for the world, but we have to start somewhere also. So I know that there's a lot of brands that are very diehard one way or the other, but how do we make the world a better place? And I think drawing a line in the sand and saying that you're not something or you are with that line is it's it's not making the world better, and
Hmm.
I think we need to take egos and all of that stuff out of it. But at the same time, we all need to stay alive financially as well. So
Right.
it's a very hard deal, but we don't have planet B. We just have this
Hmm.
one. So we really need
Hmm.
to take care of it.
I love that phrase. We don't have Planet B. I'm also inspired to hear you talk about this, and I don't think we've ever had a brand on here who's both Rock and Regenified certified, let alone the others you listed. And
Hmm.
it really is inspiring to hear you talk about this because, and I think that to your point, there are some brands who are super heavy in both camps, but there are also a number of brands who want to work with brands regardless of certification because they are doing the right thing, and you are embodying that so well. And to your point, like this movement isn't about having a super premium product for X percentage of the population, only benefiting X percentage of arable land. We want this to grow, and by allowing there to be multiple definitions and or certifications of what this regeneration movement can be, that gives us the opportunity to convert more acreage faster. So totally agree with everything you said, and it really is like impressive to see the investments you're making on your end to make your own life harder, to do something you don't have to do, to try to lead by example. So commend you for those efforts.
Thank you.
Hmm.
I'll
Amen.
call you when I need a pep talk, when it's a hard day.
You let me know if that's the support I can provide. I'm happy to do that, and I'll buy Almond book
Yeah.
for sure.
Fantastic.
You and I were exchanging some pep texts last night. I thought, Benina. So we were doing a text version of a pep talk last night, which I
Yes,
appreciated.
but that's why we need the community and we need
Yeah.
the connection because there are some really hard days.
Hmm.
And you ask yourself, is it worth it? When you're trying to lead by example and do this and I mean, my parents always had this saying they would sign the Christmas cards with, and it was are you making the world a better place? And I was like, ugh, I hated it growing up. And I literally almost say it daily, if not,
Yeah.
weekly, if not daily. And it's so true. Now I am them 40 years, 20 years ago. I'm middle aged and am raising my kids and helping my parents. And, you know, it's hard, but we
Hmm.
literally have to have that mentality of how do we make the world better? And, we're doing it through the land, but it's literally going to take everybody to do it.
Hmm.
And that's why we have these cool shirts to say farming for the
Yeah.
future,
Love it.
because we want a
Uh,
future.
for those who are listening, it is styled like Back to the Future, and it is farming
Mm.
for the future, which I really dig. Awesome 80s
Hmm.
throwback.
Hmm.
Woo woo.
So, Benina, you mentioned the importance of this community, and you have recently become a member of the Regen Brands Coalition. And, we've only it's been live for just over 3 months at this point, but curious to get your take on what is it like, and be candid. Obviously, like we built the coalition, so, we won't take anything personally, but what is it like to be a part of this? And what are you hoping to get out of working with brands in this capacity?
Well, I think it's been really good. I mean, we're more new to this space. We're a younger brand, and so it's definitely interesting to hear some of the same challenges that we have. Again, regeneration, regenerative, ROC, regenified, they're all a mouthful to say. And they have the best intention, but how do we get what it is to the consumer so that it's not just making us feel good that we're doing all this good stuff, but that we're actually also getting our product to the people and letting them know like what it is that they're also contributing to, not just for the planet, but also for themselves, for their own health. So I think that it's been really good, definitely learning for us as well. We're happy to be part of it and share our story too. But I look forward to the future. I like how you guys have it broken down. And I can just say that I look forward to seeing what comes out of it, and how we can work together. Now we're connected to Kyle with Wild Way and Tim with Philosophers. And, I think it's going to take some of those relationships to keep moving forward for everybody. And, to an extent, like we all have an ego, right? Like we all want to see something come from what we've created. But bigger picture is how do we just move it forward faster and better? And so I think it needs to be maybe less individual brands and more unity with the movement.
Amen.
Love that.
Love that. Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for your support and just being a part of it. I mean, we obviously can't do it without the brands being a part of it. In this initial group of 31, we're so proud of and so grateful for. In that, spirit of collective action and progress, I'll take us to our final question that we ask everybody, Benina, which is, how do we get Regen brands to have 50% market share by 2050?
This is a great question, and it's an exciting one because hopefully 2050 is still in my lifetime, and it's for sure in my kids' lifetime. So I hope that we're surpassing that number, because we only have 60 harvests left, if that. So we actually have to see this major change for our planet. And how is that going to happen? It's going to be happening with so many channels. I mean, we have to definitely have the retailers buy in. And I mean, that's even going to Walmart and Target and Costco. Like, they're going to have to get on board for sure. I'm happy to be connected with the Alice Waters Institute. And here in California, again, I feel like we're leading there's a lot of negative about California, but we have a lot of good positives. And the Alice Waters Institute is really trying to push that regenerative and that local with universities and schools. And so they've been pushing hard to connect farmers to those outlets, which I think is going to be very important. Hospitals, they're treating people for issues. And how do we help with that with nourishment? I mean, that's another huge connection right there for healing. And that's going to be a big one. So, yeah, I guess I would say regeneration gives me hope for the future. If we can just get enough buy-in to do it. And at some point, it's just going to be what it is. And it's not going to have a certification or any of that. It's just, I hope that we see the day that is just how we do it. Like, it's not being done right now, how we do it, that it's going to be how we do it. And it's going to have better air quality. And we're going to reinstate all of the water cycles, nutrient cycles. Having the stacked enterprises, having the animals on the land gives us way more diversity in our food choices. I think they said there's like 11 brands or 11 companies that own, most of the food systems. And that's crazy. And I think it's like 4 that have the beef production. So all of the regenerative context, movements, principles, all of it is just amazing. And I literally look forward to the future because of this way of farming.
Amen. But yeah, I love that answer. And I also love that you sort of like alluded to a future paradigm that likely will never happen, but just imagine if it did, where if regeneration was the baseline, and for every negative practice you do, you have to pay for a certification or some sort of a tax to recoup those external costs that we as a society have to pay for. Right? Could you imagine how quickly big CPG would convert? So I don't know how
Yeah.
we ever make that happen, but that is a future I would love to live in, and talk about the impact that would have on planetary health, human health, biodiversity, our water systems, our air quality. It would just be such a game changer. So love that thought concept.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast, or I was at a workshop with John Kemp, and he asked us to imagine what we wanted our farms to look like. And, that I was like envisioning an Eden,
Yeah.
and I think that we can bring a lot of those, that picture back to reality if we are committed.
Yeah.
I certainly hope so. And that's a great segue. AC, I got to do this. It's perfect timing to go to burrowsfamilyfarm.com to check out their gardens, because you have tons of pictures on there and it does look like an Eden. So that's BURROUGHS familyfarms.com. Check it out. You can also subscribe to their products on Amazon, which I highly recommend everybody do, and check out your local independents to see if they carry the product.
Mm-hmm.
Amen. And Whole Foods.
Yeah, and I wanted to say, like, it is possible. I think we start by not saying it's impossible. Like we that's what we need, and we have to make that happen. So it is possible, and I think there's a lot of people doing the work that shows that that's the case. I think there's a lot of hard work between now and the possibility of it, for sure. But yeah, Benina, just appreciate everything that you're doing, all your support of our work, and just everything you're doing out there in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Happy to be on here today and share our story. And I hope that together we can make the world a better place.
Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Benina.
Thanks.
For transcripts, show notes, and more information on this episode, check out our website, regen-brands.com. That is regen-brands.com. You can also check out our YouTube channel, Regen Brands, for all of our episodes with both video and audio. The best way to support our work is to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. You can also subscribe to our newsletter, the Regen Brands Weekly, and follow our Regen Brands LinkedIn page to stay in the know on all the latest news, insights, and perspectives from the world of regenerative CPG. Thanks so much for tuning into the Regen Brands podcast. We hope you learned something new in this episode, and it empowers you to use your voice, your time, your talent, and your dollars to help us build a better and more regenerative food system. Love you guys.